If we now turn to when you finally, mashallah, do get to Syria, mashallah, just tell us about that time, inshallah. I know I know there's a lot there, but if just for those who are thirsty, obviously Allah yafarrij akhwana fi Sham, but there's people who for the foreseeable future will not have the opportunity to go there. So if you can sort of take us there, inshallah.
On that last point, on that last point, inshallah, and inshallah, Allah says, there's no doubt Allah's going to lift it. And it's not just Sham or the Yemen, both of them, Allah's going to lift the pain and calamity. And we know from the Prophet ﷺ that when things get really hot, because it's only just started, they're the full start. Those are the two lands where all the Muslims are going to go to. They become the place of sanctuary. They become the place of safety. So at the moment, even though these two lands, which are amongst the most beloved lands to the Prophets, are the Sham, are the Yemen, Allahumma barik lana fi Sham wa fi Yemenina. So these are the two lands. This is just off the point. While I was in Damascus, a friend of mine who was there studying, he was just learning language there. And while he was studying, he was also teaching English as a foreign language. So just so he had some pocket money to keep him going. And he said that one of the Syrians there, he asked him, like, why is it all of you ajanib? Like, oh, why is it all of you, like, you come to Syria? Like, what is it? And his answer, mashallah, his answer was inspired. He said, nah. He said, nah, that's it. And he said, what do you mean? He said, the Prophet said, Shami, nah. It's our Sham. It's our Yemen. So he said, it's because of the nah. He said, that's why we come. Mashallah. It's because the Prophet said it's our land. That's the reason why we come. That's the reason why we come to this land. So, mashallah, Ard Mubarak, there's going to come a time, inshallah, it's all going to flip around. Like all that pain that both of these beautiful lands, the lands of the Prophet, that they're suffering. The Prophet himself said in the end times, he said, the full start of the Muslims, the safety and security, it's going to be Sham, it's going to be Yemen. There. So, inshallah, things will change there. Just a personal thing, which I don't think I've shared with anybody pretty much, but this is part of. So around that time when I was studying, I made a personal dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Sham was the answer to that dua. I made a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, take me to the people and the places that are beloved to you and your messenger. Take me to the people and the places that are beloved to you and your messenger. And then suddenly out of the Sham opens up. Even though I was aware of it, but suddenly I'm coming into contact with people like Sheikh Samar and Nos. And suddenly, like a few months later, I'm in Damascus. A few months later after that. And then also the Haba'ib, like they're coming out now, like people across the West are now suddenly hearing about the Haba'ib, Habib Kadhim, Habib Umar. So I'm convinced that the journey to Sham was answered to a dua. It was an answer to a personal dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, take me to the people and places and lands that are beloved to you. And when you go there, you saw that clearly. Even though Sha'b al-Balad, people in the country, people are just people. But when you see, for example, that I happened to, in Damascus, I was there for 3 years from 2007 to 2010. Within the first, I was living in an area in Damascus called Rukn ad-Din, which is predominantly Kurdish area. A lot of students live there because you have one of the main Arabic learning centers there, Jami' Ibn Nur, it's called Jami' Ibn Nur. So I was living just along the road, like Sharia Asad-ad-Din it was called, just living off there. And there was on the corner there's a masjid called Jam' al-Qubbatayn, the two domes. And there's after a few days, I see some man walking in there. And I look again, Sheikh Sa'id Ramadan al-Bouti.
MashaAllah.
And it was around Maghrib time, he's gone in. And he put his sandals there, and I was looking at his sandals, thinking, I can't remember, I was thinking either I'm going to take his sandals or I was going to just hold them for him. I can't remember what it was. And but then one Shami, one Syrian there, he's looking at me, and he could see what I was thinking. He says, don't do it. He said he'll have you. He said he'll have you. because he hates like taqbil al-yad or the Sheikh Sa'i Ramadan. Like, he absolutely hated that and stopped people from doing that. And then it dawned on me, because Jami' al-Bulti, which is the masjid where he was the imam and he was a khatib for about a year and a half while I was there. And it dawned on me, like, my local imam in the masjid is probably the greatest scholar in the world alive now. And you can walk around any masjid. And one of the things, and the Syrians didn't appreciate this. They didn't appreciate this. You can walk around, Fajr, Durus al-Quran, and classes of knowledge everywhere. Like, some of the leading scholars in the world around the corner from you. You could just like one little bus drive, and you're in the masjid, and you're there sat in the presence of, like, from where I was living to Al-Umawi, Jami' Al-Umawi, the Umayyad Mosque. It would take, like, on a bus, it'll take about 10 minutes maximum to get there. And you have some of the leading scholars in the world present there. And that was one of the things, like, that's barakat to Sham. That was the blessings of that land. That from the birth of the Prophet, when he sees the light shine to Ard al-Sham, and he sees Qusur Busra, he sees the palaces of Busra, that's the light that's gone there, is knowledge. And I'll just mention this. Like, my main fiqh teacher there, his name is Sheikh Muhammad al-Jum'ah. MashaAllah. Without a doubt, he's from Ahlullah, from the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's one of the main students of Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Halabi, who was considered, along with Sheikh Adib Kallas, the leading Hanafi scholar in Sham. So for about 2.5 years, I studied fiqh with him, consistently. And he was, mashallah, in fiqh, Hanafi fiqh, mashallah, he was powerful. And I remember one time, there's a masjid called Jami' al-Badriya, which is behind the Umayyad Masjid. And in the room there, we used to go in there and have classes with him. So one time, another sheikh comes and sits with him. And at that time, so that was around 2009 and 10, where it was beginning to get a bit hot at that point. And there was a lot of pressure from the government upon the ulama at that point. And so there was, I forgot what it was, but the government had passed a verdict at that point, which was causing a lot of problem for the ulama. So this sheikh is telling Sheikh Muhammad Jum'ah about this, and you could see there's some pain in his, you could see it on his face. But then I remember he smiled. He smiled. Because he said the Prophet promised us that ilm will remain in Sham until the day of judgment. He promised us that knowledge will stay in Syria until the day of judgment. So he said, inshallah, it'll be fine. No.
And just inshallah, the first time you went to Sham, if I'm not mistaken, it was yourself and the Faqir went together.
I remember that.
Inshallah. And again,
I'll just share this to everybody here who know you well as well. It was it June, July 1999. And I remember, because at that time Sheikh Ibrahim was there and Ustad Yahya Road and like them. They were all there studying at that time. This is just before they gone to Tarim. I remember that was the year Man United did the treble. I don't think you remember that. I remember that. I remember you phoned home to your dad and he said they've just won the treble. I remember we were freaking out, and I just said, "Alhamdulillah, I'm not in England."
Actually, I remember Sheikh Ibrahim saying, "We'll never hear the last of it."
Although, just to be clear, a couple of weeks time, it's done. First to be lifted. We're back as Premier League champions.
No doubt, no doubt. Mashallah, I remember doing my exams at university. I think did that on a Friday, and the next day we jumped on the plane with yourself. It was the first time I'd ever gone on the plane. First time I even left the country. I remember telling my mum and dad, "I'm going to go to Syria." They looked at me and said, "We don't think so." You know, like, I'm going with Sheikh Harun. Said, "We don't think so." I got the ticket, packed my bag, and they looked at me. They were shocked. Like, you actually gonna... And we went for about 10 days, but they were really shocked. And I think for me, that was the first indication to my parents that there's something I want to do with my life that's slightly different or majorly different to perhaps what they had intended for me to do. But I just, do you remember Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi?
Allah. Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi, Allah.
Hassan al-Hindi, right? Hassan.
Allah.
I remember when Sheikh Ibrahim and Sheikh Yahya and Sheikh Muhammad Ubaidullah Mendez, they took us, yourself and myself. And I remember, share the story quickly. He was blind.
Yeah.
And going into his room, we were introduced one by one. This is so so. This is so so. This is, and that's how we kind of knew our names.
Yeah.
And then when we sat down, obviously there was questions that they were asked. That was, for me, that was impressive. Just, you could go to Sheikh's house and ask different questions. That was very amazing. I remember when we left. Now, as obviously as we all get up, we're in a different sequence to the sequence we came in. So now, the person at the front, at the back, and so on and so forth. And he was shaking everyone's hand. And I remember that when he, when he came to, before he shook my hand, he said, Zain. And I shook my hand. And for me was the first time that I'd noticed, to be more precise, I'd noticed, or I became aware that this man is a man of Allah, a wali of Allah, a friend of God. Because how could he have known that was me? There was no indication that was me. But before he shook my hand, Zain, and for me that struck me in my heart. Okay, this is wali min awliya Allah. And for me, that was the first time that I'd noticed. And I say noticed because there may be people throughout my life that I never noticed, but this is the first time where I really noticed, where you could argue this was a sort of a karama. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. But mashallah, that left its mark on me.
Mashallah, we were taking Sheikh Hassan Hindi's house, mashallah, back in '99. Alhamdulillah, I was fortunate and blessed that when I went back there, alhamdulillah, I got a chance to study a lot of stuff with him as well. Because mashallah, Sheikh Hassan Hindi is faqih. He's a master in Hanafi fiqh.
Sheikh Harun, sorry, could you move the computer closer, because the volume is low. I want people to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, no, so I was saying that I was fortunate and blessed amongst the teachers that I was able to study with, because we had that ziyarah of him, we visited him the first time around. But then after that, like when I went back there, 2007, alhamdulillah, I was fortunate and blessed. He's an imam of a masjid called Jam al-Hajibiyya, which again, mashallah, somebody like him is just like 5-minute walk from where I was living to get to where he was. And so he had classes all the time. Like he's a master of Hanafi fiqh, master of Aqidah, all of the ulum al-aqliya, all of these rational sciences. And it's one of the gifts that Allah blessed him with, because he was blind. Like he was like a computer. He was like a computer, and he's like reeling out the information and knowledge. Subhanallah. So Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi, mashallah, min rijalillah, without a doubt, one of the true people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm still fortunate to have his contact. So whenever I have especially issues around the Aqidah, like troubling questions, so I'll send it to him, inshallah. He gives some amazing answers, mashallah.
MashaAllah. Khair, barakallah fiqh. Obviously, the time in Syria and Sham, mashallah, I know you could speak for hours, and probably you have done. There's a joy in doing that, I know.
Afwan, I'll tell you one thing about that. It may be just something about me, because but it's not something that I speak out about a lot, and I should do a bit more about that, because those 3 years, they were the most blessed years in my life. Those 3 years in Sham, amongst the most blessed years in my life. And just to mention once again, Sheikh Muhammad Jum'ah, we sat, there was me and 2 other students, and so he was one of the most amazing things about Sheikh Muhammad Jum'ah, hafidhahullah ta'ala, is that he had the best tea. He used to make the best tea, and even though it's like it was like the tea that the taxi driver used to drink, but there's something blessed about how he used to make it. And I one time I told him, so Sheikh, mashallah, we come here and we learn from you. But I said, that tea, mashallah, I said, I come off the time just for a cup of tea with you. So one time he's making the tea, because he would read for about half an hour, so then he'd pause for a bit and go and do the tea and then come back. And we were just talking amongst ourselves as students, and I just mentioned, I said, these are the most blessed days we'll ever experience in our lives. These days here, just being in these circles of knowledge. And so when Sheikh Muhammad Jum'ah comes back, he's finished the tea, so what were you talking about? And I told him that. And he mentioned a hikayah from Abu Yusuf, Abu Hanifa. He mentioned a narration that Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, the great faqih, one of the greatest qudat of the ummah, one of the greatest judges and scholars of this nation, after Abu Hanifa's passed away, he's considered the second in the madhab. He's considered the Imam al-Thani, the second Imam in the madhab after Abu Hanifa. And he's appointed Qadi al-Qada, the chief judge. The Khalifa at that time, the leader at that time, is providing everything. So one occasion he tells him, the Khalifa tells me, is there anything that we can bring you? And he cries at that point, Abu Yusuf. And he said, حَبَّذَا مَجْلِسًا مِنْ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ مَجْلِسًا مِنْ مَجَالِسِ أَبِي حَنِيفَةَ. He said, if only he could have one of those classes with Abu Hanifa. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why I don't say too much about it, because those moments they were unique moments. But before you go on, because there's so many teachers, so many shuyukh, so many experiences, so much that can be said about those days there. But I just want to mention one. Although most of my studying was fiqh and the other sciences, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to read Quran upon a sheikh there, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Uthman. His name is Sheikh Abdul Hakim Uthman. He's the Imam of a masjid, Jami' al-Rukniyya. He's now in Turkey. He was also blind. But mashallah, a special man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I was introduced to him and I told him that I'd like to read the Quran to you. So he would make time whenever he would make time. And I remember for about a year and a half, I would go to him to the masjid, which was at the bottom of the road where he was living. So I would go down there, read half a juz, read a juz of the Quran to him. But one thing amazing with him is that sometimes we would meet somewhere and we'll get on the bus and then he said, Bismillah, start reading. In a taxi going somewhere, he said, Bismillah, start reading. Walking, Bismillah, start reading. Like whatever, just any moment, just start reading the Quran. And so over the space of about 2 years, I'd finished most of it. And this, I completely believe this is clearly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That for about, I think a few months I hadn't seen him, so I'd still had a portion left that hadn't finished. So he sends a message through one of the students, say, find Harun and tell him to come. Tell him to come, he has to finish it before he leaves. So I started going back and it finished off. And the finishing was one of the most beautiful experiences I ever had in Syria. In the masjid, so they announced it, Talib Ilm min al-Gharb, student from the West has come here. He's going to be finishing the Quran. So finished the Quran. He had me, the final surahs, he gets me to lead the prayer and read it. And then after that, I don't even know his name. There's a sheikh that he introduced, and he, as he's giving the ijazah, he reads the full sanad, reads his full chain, like from Abdul Hakim, Sheikh Abdul Hakim Uthman, from Sheikh Muhammad Sukkar, going all the way back from Hafs, from Asim, from Zirr bin Hubaysh, from Abdullah bin Mas'ud, from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Jibreel alayhi salam, from Rabb al-Izzah. Like, so you're hearing the sanad going all the way back to the chain, all the way back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he made me laugh. At that point, then Sheikh Abdul Hakim Uthman, he gets up and he just says a few words. Mashallah. Because at that time, I think the war was about, there was problems around that time. So he said to all of the Musallin, he said, he's come from England. He said, they send their bombs to us, we send the Quran back to them. They send their bombs to us, we send the Quran back to them. MashaAllah. Sheikh Abdul Hakim Uthman, inshallah, if you ever go to Turkey, look out for him, you'll find him there.
It is, I understand what you're saying about we don't talk about these things often. And I think some of the times it could be difficult to do that because the people might not understand, sometimes there's very personal moments in your life. So it is quite difficult. But I do think for those people.
Sheikh Zain, just one thing I want to say there, because you just remind me of something. So when it came back the summer of 2010, and it was actually Liverpool University Islamic Society. They asked me to start doing some classes there. So at that time I was doing some fiqh classes, I think it was. So that was September 2010 onwards with the ISOC, we're doing some fiqh classes. And I remember, I shouldn't have said it because I just freshly come back from there, so it was still like deep. Let's see what. Yeah, fiqh and aqeedah. Yeah, but I remember one time. So we were discussing a mas'ala in fiqh, and just something dawned on me at that point. And I just went silent, and I looked up at the class and I said, only a few months back. I said I'd be sat in the company of Sheikh Saeed Ramadan al-Bouti, Sheikh Usama Rifa'i, Sheikh Hassan al-Hindi. I said, no, I'm sat with you lot. Because one of the problems when you come back from these blessed lands, everybody who goes there experiences it. Like, it's a massive drop. It's a massive drop, and you can get depressed, but it's a spiritual depression. Like, you're sat in the presence of awliya Allah. You're sat in the presence of the most blessed people day and night. Like, from you start the morning of Fajr, you go into a masjid reading Quran, and just from there up until after Isha, you just move from dars to dars to dars to dars, and that's all you're doing. Like, so many of you all know Sheikh Bilal Brown in Manchester. He was there at the same time as me. And one time I was saying that from one class, we jump in a micro and we go the other side of Damascus to another class. He said, all we're doing, he said, just moving from Roldam ila Rolda ila Rolda min Riyadh al-Jannah. He said, we're just moving from one field of paradise to another field of paradise to another field of paradise. So that's like, for 3 years, that was the norm. And then you come back here. And it was depressing. It was depressing. It was hard to deal with. But that's the importance. And then when you do is that you create it, or you move in those environments where that's being nourished and replenished all the time. So you're always in the environment of goodness. So then you don't lose that goodness, and it's then your responsibility to share the blessings that you took and you were exposed to.